Now, as many of you guys may know, the US Constitution prohibits a president from running for a third term. This comes from the 22nd Amendment. But the 22nd Amendment was ratified in 1951. So, this idea that a president can't run for a third term wasn't always the case. Prior to 1951, prior to the ratification of the 22nd Amendment, we did have people, or we did have presidents attempting to run for a third term. Now, as many of you guys may know, the US Constitution does prohibit a president from running for a third term. This is unconstitutional. But this wasn't always the case. The 22nd Amendment, however, wasn't ratified until 1951. So prior to that, it was possible for a president to want to seek a third term, but the only one who did so successfully was FDR, who went up to 4 terms. But even though it wasn't unconstitutional to go for a third term, it was the norm only to do 2 terms, and this goes back all the way to George Washington. Now, George Washington famously refused to seek a third term. He actually refused to become a king altogether because people loved George Washington so much that they wanted him to become a king. But he refused to do so because we just fought a war against the king. We just fought a war against tyranny, and the idea that George Washington was just going to come in and effectively become the same exact thing that we fought against was completely asinine. And so he refused to seek a third term. He refused to become a king because the last thing he wanted was for a president to overstay their welcome. And ever since then, the idea that a president should only serve 2 terms, that became the norm. It became the norm all the way up until FDR. And even before FDR who ran 4 terms, even before him, with people like Ulysses S. Grant, who did attempt to run for a third term, they lost pretty decisively because people weren't like they don't like this idea of a third term. They don't like this idea of a president overstaying their welcome. We're very allergic to that notion. And it's kind of been a hallmark of Americana ever since. I mean, this country was born out of revolution. It was born out of retaliation against the king. And so the idea that a president should have more than 2 terms, should go on for a third term, a fourth term, or however long, it seems diametrically opposed to the values that founded this country. I mean, we're proud of the fact that we have a representative democracy. We're proud of the fact that we have term limits, or at the very least, we should be as a country. And so when a president comes along and says that he wants to run for a third term or a fourth term or however long, and then he's also posting pictures of himself with a crown where he looks like a king, well, it should be a little bit concerning for those who actually care about this country and love the ideals that this country was founded upon. And Trump has been asked multiple times whether or not he will run for a third term. And he almost never just flat out says no. He'll say things like, well, the Constitution says I can't, so there's that. But when you put that alongside everything else that he said about this topic, everything else that he said regarding whether or not he wants to run for a third term, well, you see a concerning pattern there. So let's take a look at the most recent example of Donald Trump responding to the question whether or not he'll run for a third term.
Steve Bannon said in a recent interview that there could be plans for you to be able to run and potentially win a third term in 2028. Is that something you'd be willing to challenge the court to be?
Well, I haven't really thought about it. We have some very good people, as you know, but I have the best poll numbers I've ever had. I mean, I just solved 8 wars and a 9th is coming. I believe Russia, Ukraine will happen.
You said that for 2028, they're very good people.
Well, we have great people. Well, I don't have to get into that, but we have one of them standing right here. We have JD, obviously. The vice president is great. I think Marco's great. I think, I'm not sure if anybody would run against us. I think if they ever formed a group, it would be unstoppable. I really do. I believe that. I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers. If you read it, am I not ruling it out? I mean, you'll have to tell me. All I can tell you is that we have a great group of people, which they don't. They have Jasmine Crockett, a low IQ person. They have AOC's low IQ. You give her an IQ test, have her pass like the exams that I decided to take when I was at Walter Reed. Those are very hard, they're really aptitude tests, I guess, in a certain way, but they're cognitive tests. Let AOC go against Trump. Let Jasmine go against Trump. I don't think Jasmine, the first couple of questions are easy, a tiger, an elephant, a giraffe, you know. When you get up to about 5 or 6, and then when you get up to 10 and 20 and 25, they couldn't come close to answering any of those questions.
The readout for Walter Reed mentioned advanced medical imaging. Did you get an MRI? Can you tell us what that was?
I did. I got an MRI. It was perfect. Yeah. I mean, I gave you the full results. We had an MRI, and in the machine, you know, the whole thing,
yeah.
And it was perfect. Yeah.
Did you say what in particular they were?
You could ask the doctors. In fact, we have doctors traveling with us, but I think they gave you a very conclusive. Nobody has ever given you reports like I gave you. And if I didn't think it was going to be good, either I would let you know negatively, I wouldn't run, I'd do something. But the doctor said some of the best reports for the age, some of the best reports they've ever seen.
One theory on how you might try to serve a third term is that you could run as the vice president.
Yeah, I'd be allowed to do that.
Is it the White House or the White House counsels or your legal position? I
No,
guess,
you'd be allowed
you
to
could
do that, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. And I think it's
You're ruling that
it's
out.
too cute. Yeah, I would rule that out because it's too cute. I think the people wouldn't like that. It's too cute. It's not. It wouldn't be right.
Well, I would hope that the reason why the people wouldn't like that isn't because him being vice president and JD Vance being the president is too cute. I would hope it's because it's un-American to do so. It's borderline tyrannical to want to do so at this point, especially when you look at the poll numbers regarding Trump. Even if Trump is correct in claiming that he solved 8 wars, which he certainly didn't, even if he were to be correct in terms of how effective his presidency has been, and obviously by effective, I mean positively effective, even if that were to be true, it doesn't take away from the fact that it is un-American, it is unconstitutional to run for a third term. It doesn't matter how good your presidency was. The idea is that we have this set in place. We have this check here set in place so that way people don't get drunk with power if Trump isn't already drunk with power. A third term is not contingent and should not be contingent on the performance of the presidency. It shouldn't matter whether or not a president actually did a good job. It should matter whether or not that president respects and values the rules and regulations that this country has established for the executive branch. If they don't respect these rules, if they don't respect these regulations, if they don't respect the norms or the cultural ideals upon which this country was founded upon, then we can safely say that that president is unfit to be the president of the United States. And as I said before, this isn't just an isolated instance. Trump has been consistently asked about whether or not he's going to run for a third term, and not just Trump, but also people within his orbit as well. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was asked this question, and he kind of just fumbled around until he ultimately said, yeah, we're just trolling the Democrats or whatever. But the issue is that whenever you put up these instances together, you put them in conjunction with one another, you start to notice a pattern. In none of the responses is there ever a flat out no. And even if you could find me one instance where someone does say just flat out no, an instance that I personally haven't seen, when you put it alongside every other instance of someone within this administration being asked that question, Trump being asked that question, it paints a concerning picture. This should be a resounding no. No, Trump is not running for a third term. He might have his MAGA goons run for a term for the presidency, but Trump himself isn't going to run for a third term. You don't see that, however. So here's Tommy Tuberville, the senior senator from Alabama. Here's what he had to say when confronted with this question.
Senator, is it constitutional for President Trump to run for a third term? He's teasing that.
You know, if you read the Constitution, it says it's not. But if he says he has some different circumstances that might be able to go around the Constitution, but that's up to him. We got a long way to go.
But you're open to it.
Well, I think that there's going to have to be an evaluation from President Trump's viewpoint to the Constitution. There'll be a lot of legal aspects to it. Will it happen? It's very unlikely, but don't ever close the book on President Trump.
Could you imagine one of those circumstances where he is able to run?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we got a lot more problems than that right now. So we'll let the Constitution, all the lawyers up here figure that out.
Senator, you said
Yeah, but one of the biggest problems that we have right now is that we have a president who's willing to on the Constitution so long as it benefits himself. He clearly doesn't care about the Constitution. And it doesn't seem like this senator cares about the Constitution either, because he should have responded with an emphatic no. That it is, he even said it himself. If you read the Constitution, it says that he can't run for a third term. Okay, end of conversation. End of conversation. However, he then goes on to say, but you know, Donald Trump, who knows? Maybe he has, maybe he's working on something. Maybe he has a secret plan, and he says this with a smirk on his face. He says this as if this is a good thing. Now, if we look at the history of what Trump has said specifically about running for a third term, here's him at an August 2020 rally. This is in Wisconsin. This is during his 2020 campaign bid, and during his speech, he said something interesting.
In 78 days, we're going to stop the radical left. We're going to win the state of Wisconsin, and we are going to win 4 more years. And then after that, we'll go for another 4 years because, you know what, they spied on my campaign. We should get a redo of 4 years. You know, they're going to go out of business when I do leave, in, let's say, 16, 20 years, something like that. So when we leave, they're all out of business.
Now, here's one where he's speaking at the NRA convention. This was back in May of 2024. Here's what he has to say about a third term.
Magnificent voice, great debater, very smart man. You know, FDR, 16 years, almost 16 years. He was 4-term. I don't know. Are we going to be considered 3-term or 2-term? You tell me. Ronnie, what do you think? Are we 3-term or 2-term if we win?
Geez, it's absolutely terrifying that there's people in the audience out there yelling 3. That's how you know that these people don't actually care about American values. Like these people who claim that they're patriots, who have the Punisher decal logo on their back of their truck that has the little blue stripe. Not that against cops, I'm just giving you a caricature of the type of person that I'm speaking about, and I would argue that it had, like with a 99% accuracy, it's like this type of person. Like these people aren't actually patriots. Like this is just performative. There's a huge difference between being performatively pro-America, being aesthetically pro-America, versus actually being legitimately pro-America by defending the values upon which this country were founded upon, by defending the Constitution and arguing and fighting against these tyrannical people that want to go on and run for 3rd terms, 4 terms, just be in power for as long as they possibly can. There's a huge difference between just looking the look by having like an America t-shirt, by putting the American flag in front of your house, by putting all those cringy decal stickers on the back of your truck. There's a difference between just doing that, just doing it for looks, doing it for show, and then actually doing the work and understanding what makes this country so great. What makes this country, in my opinion, one of the best countries in the world regarding its founding values. Unfortunately, the world of MAGA is completely devoid of anyone who actually understands what this country stands for. And the fact that someone in the audience, multiple people in the audience, were yelling out, yeah, 3 terms, run for a 3rd term, it's depressing. Remember that this is the same person that signed an executive order attempting to overthrow birthright citizenship, something that is constitutional. If you're born in this country and like your dad or mom isn't like a diplomat or an ambassador from another country, you're born on an embassy, or you're not part of an invading army, you're not the child of an invading army, you're born in this country, you're a U.S. citizen, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry to say, you're a U.S. citizen. That is within the Constitution, and it's clear cut. That is an example that is very clear cut, established by the Supreme Court, what specific interpretation we mean to adopt. And we all recognize that, yes, if you're born in this country, you're a U.S. citizen. But Trump doesn't care. There was another instance earlier this year in March where Donald Trump was being interviewed by NBC, and again, doesn't rule out a 3rd term. And in fact, he's being serious. We're going to go ahead and read some of the experts from that phone interview. So this is from NBC News. So it says, President Donald Trump did not rule out the possibility of seeking a 3rd term in the White House, which is prohibited by the Constitution under the 22nd Amendment, saying in an exclusive interview with NBC News that there were methods for doing so and clarifying that he was not joking. A lot of people want me to do it, Trump said in a Sunday morning phone call with NBC News, referring to his allies. But I mean, I basically tell them we have a long way to go, It's very early in the administration. I'm focused on the current, Trump added in some of his most extensive comments to date about serving a 3rd term. When asked whether he wanted another term, the president responded, I like working. I'm not joking, Trump said when asked to clarify, but I'm not. It is far too early to think about it. When asked whether he has been presented with plans to allow him to seek a 3rd term, Trump said, there are methods which you could do it. So he wants this. He clearly wants this. And in fact, his former White House chief strategist, Steve Bannon, even said so in an interview with The Economist. And we're going to listen to some parts from that interview, and it's equally distressing. So check this out. So he wants this. He clearly wants this. I mean, it's difficult to imagine how he could possibly be any more explicit than this. And in fact, again, if you look at the pattern of what him and his administration has said about this issue, and apparently has 15 hours of unreleased footage of him interviewing Epstein because he wanted Epstein to go on a redemption tour, basically. He wanted Epstein to have a redemption arc because his public image was pretty much tainted, from the whole sex trafficking thing that kind of happened that got brushed under the rug once Trump became president, even though he said he was going to release the Epstein files. Yeah, so that same Steve Bannon here, he's having an interview with The Economist, and The Economist, they ask him about this, about a potential 3rd term for Donald Trump, and here's what he had to say.
And does he need a 3rd term in order to see that job through?
Well, he's going to get a 3rd term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. And the way we finish it through Trump. Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys.
Even if you find some way around it. And to those
Can the American people, if the American people, with the mechanisms that we have, put Trump back in office, are the American people tearing up the Constitution? Would that be tearing up?
Well,
would the American people be going against the spirit of the Constitution, ma'am?
I think yes.
The answer is yes. It's a very simple answer. The answer is yes. It doesn't matter if 99.9% of the people within the United States want Donald Trump to run for a third term. It's still unconstitutional. They are still shitting all over the Constitution. And that's why so many people criticize MAGA. They criticize this administration. They criticize the people who are just going along with it and turning a blind eye to everything that Trump is doing, precisely because so much of it is anti-constitutional. And again, these are the same people that claim to be very hardcore pro-America. But if you were to sit these people down and ask them, what are the founding values of this country? They'd probably give you some stupid shit that is aligned with whatever MAGA tells them it should be aligned with. So it's not a debate. It's not a matter of whether or not we should have a certain interpretation of the 22nd Amendment or another interpretation of the 22nd Amendment. No, it's crystal clear. A president cannot run for a third term. And that's why I consistently say over and over and over again, this administration is the most anti-American one that we've had in God knows how long. But they know this. They know it's unconstitutional. But what they're doing by constantly, refusing to give like a straight answer, but invoking it every now and then by bringing it up, hey, a third term possibly, is that they're normalizing this language. They're normalizing the conversation, and they're desensitizing people to the allergic reaction that they probably initially have when they hear a president wanting to run for a third term. If they say it over and over and over again, and they bring it up within the conversation over and over and over again, you normalize this language. It becomes a lot more normal. And so by the time it comes for Donald Trump to possibly run for a third term, it doesn't hit as well as it originally did. It's a way to desensitize the public to a situation where they should have a strong reaction. They should feel very strongly about the idea of a president wanting to run for a third term, and then possibly a fourth term, and then God knows for how long. So I can only hope that by the time Trump's presidency comes to an end, hopefully crossing my fingers that it eventually does come to an end at the end of these 4 years, I can only hope that people are going to have a strong reaction against him wanting to run for a third term, against him trying to pull off any shenanigans to try to steal the election again. Anyways, yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I can only hope that after Trump's second term that people do have that strong reaction against him wanting to run for a third term, and we can finally be rid of Trump forever after his presidency is over.